Oh, hello. On Monday, December 4th, Wizards of the Coast announced a change to its banned and restricted list with dramatic implications for its two most popular non-rotating formats, Modern and Pioneer. In Modern, Fury became the first Modern Horizons 2 card to find itself on the ban list. Up the Beanstalk, a powerful card draw engine that made a devastating pairing with free spells and spells with cost reduction clauses like Solitude and Leyline Binding, has also been forcibly retired from the format. Pioneer received its own shakeup, in many ways more groundbreaking than the one that hit Modern. To the surprise of very few, Karn, the not-so-great creator, and Geological Appraiser have now been banned. Karn has been one of the most oft-complained-about cards in Pioneer for nearly 2 years now, for its crimes committed in the mono-green Devotion deck. Appraiser, on the other hand, is a much more recent offender. The unassuming 4-mana uncommon from Lost Caverns of Ixalan was banned after only 17 days spent legal in the format. Because, oops, it's a one-card combo that wins the game on turn 3 in tandem with a turn 2 Treasure Maker. Many Magic the Gathering players saw these two bans coming as Wizards of the Coast tipped their hand on their weekly Magic the Gathering stream 1 week prior. Much more shocking was the unbanning that accompanied Karn and Appraiser's exit from the format. Smuggler's Copter. Smuggler's Copter is now on the menu in Pioneer after its initial banning in 2019 during Pioneer's beta testing period. So is this really the right time to ban these cards? What about the unbanning of Smuggler's Copter? When even is the right time to ban Magic cards? Is there ever a right time? Well, buckle up, because we are talking bans. But before we talk bans, I want to talk these four, the fourth one's on the floor, I want to talk about these 4 Warhammer Commander decks that I'm giving away to viewers during my next Whatnot stream this Tuesday, December 12th. Oh, there it is. I'm not only giving these Commander decks away, but also some collector booster boxes and other surprises, and I'm also giving you a $15 credit to spend on whatever you want on Whatnot, whether it's Magic cards or Magic packs or even, wait for it, non-Magic items. Whatnot is basically like if Twitch and eBay had a baby. You bid on items either being auctioned off or buy it now prices, and you get to watch and interact with the sellers on their streams. And when you use my code to sign up, you get a $15 credit towards buying or bidding on whatever you want. I'll even have some cool things up for grabs on my stream besides these giveaways. But use my code for whatever. It's $15 for you, from me. So tune in this December 12th at 10 a.m. and use code www.whatnot.com/invite/Tolarian College to get a $15 credit to spend on my stream or anyone's stream and get cool things like Magic cards and packs and products, and maybe you'll walk away with one of these Warhammer Commander decks or a collector booster box of something special or one of my many other surprises. I'll see you on Whatnot, and thank you Whatnot for sponsoring this video. All right, well, that sure beats having to have your favorite Magic card banned out from under you. Oh, speaking of which, let's talk bans. These bans and the one unban are indeed some hefty changes to both Modern and Pioneer, but more significant than this banned and restricted announcement itself was the shift in ban philosophy that Wizards of the Coast described in both last week's weekly MTG stream and the December 4th banned and restricted article update, which I will link in this video's description. To understand the significance of the new BNR philosophy, we first need to discuss a little bit of history. Believe it or not, contrary to how things work these days, Wizards of the Coast used to not ban cards almost ever. Yes, some stuff slipped through the cracks. Modern received a significant ban about once or twice a year, especially as the format was first getting on its feet, but all of Standard only saw 2 bans from 2006 through 2016. During those 10 years, the only Standard bans were Jace the Mind Sculptor and Stoneforge Mystic. Thank you very much, Brian Kibler. Modern also received several unbans along that time period, including the infamous unban, oops, we should have kept this banned, Golgari Grave Troll banning incident. Since 2017, however, Standard has seen a whopping 30 cards get banned. During that same time frame, 20 cards have been banned in Modern. And in Pioneer, if you don't count the weekly bannings that occurred in the first couple months of the format, 15 cards have been banned. All that is to say, cards get banned way more now than they used to be. For several years, these bans happened as needed and without much warning. If Wizards of the Coast determined a card needed to go, they'd release an article and that card would be out of here. This was a fine MO when bans were few and far between, but given the new normal rate of bans, a common sentiment expressed by many Magic the Gathering players became, why should I buy these new powerful cards if they're likely to get banned out from under me? In an expensive game like Magic the Gathering, having the Chase Mythic that you bought 4 copies of just to keep up with the meta get banned out from under you? Yeah, it's a devastating financial blow. Wizards of the Coast has taken a few different approaches to this problem. From the frequently memed, we are announcing that there will be an announcement soon, to their approach during the COVID era of Magic where they said, to heck with it, you're only playing digitally anyway, we're gonna make these changes effective immediately. But as paper standard has continued to decline, and as the flow of meta-warping cards into Eternal formats has not diminished, it became increasingly clear that something had to be done to restore player faith in purchasing powerful new paper game pieces. In May of this year, Wizards of the Coast announced that it would be moving to a once-a-year model for banning cards, with a particular eye toward banning cards in Standard. This yearly BNR update would coincide with the release of the fall set and would address all formats, though its main focus would be Standard. Wizards of the Coast also said there would be an emergency ban and restricted window 3 weeks after the release of each new set to address any unforeseen problem cards. This announcement made some sense in that it alleviated concerns that players would have their cards banned out from under them without warning. It also meant that, for the most part, mind-numbing conversations surrounding bans would be limited, at least for the most part, to these once-a-year BNR announcements. This is good for the community, as discussions about which cards should be banned or unbanned are often cyclical and pointless at best, and annoying and highly subjective at worst. However, there is a problem with having a once-a-year banned and restricted schedule with post-new set banned and restricted announcements relegated to a kind of break glass in case of emergency situation. And that problem is that, what constitutes an emergency? What if a format is unhealthy, but it's not an emergency? For that matter, what does unhealthy even mean? Sure, if a deck or card is obviously broken, like Eye of Ugin Eldrazi was in Modern, or Standard Copycat Combo, that's an easy call to make. But what if a deck is simply good and highly played, but not broken? What if a deck isn't even that good, but it's just miserable to play against? When Inverter of Truth and its combo colleagues were banned from Pioneer, Wizards of the Coast stated that none of the banned decks had problematic win rates. Players just didn't want to play against them. Heck, in the recent banned and restricted update, Wizards of the Coast said that Mono-Green Devotion was on the decline. They just deemed Karn and his limitless access to wishboard targets to be problematic for the format. Why is it problematic now versus 6 months ago or a year ago? Who knows? In the May announcement, Wizards of the Coast stressed that the once-a-year banned and restricted update would primarily focus on Standard, since they want to avoid Standard bans as much as possible. But they didn't say much about when or how they would address problematic cards in other formats, beyond that the once-a-year B&R would touch on other formats too. With no clear picture as to when bans could happen, players suddenly had even less clarity over the status of their favorite Eternal formats. With powerful new cards like the One Ring and Orcish Bowmasters entering Modern just a couple of weeks before the first annual B&R, players didn't know what would happen to these cards or the supporting cast around these cards. There just wasn't enough time for the meta to shake out, but if they were problematic and they didn't get banned, during this yearly B&R, did that mean we'd have to wait a full year before we got another chance? Which brings us to the current B&R philosophy. In the December 4th B&R, Wizards announced that the window after a new set would be shifting to between 2 and 5 weeks after a new set is released, rather than a strict 3 weeks. They also discussed in greater detail their philosophy surrounding Pioneer bans in particular. Going forward, Wizards of the Coast will be quote-unquote actively using their main set release B&R cadence to take better care of Pioneer. To paraphrase Gordon Ramsay, finally, some good Urza clarity. at least for one of the two main Eternal formats. Wizards of the Coast discussed Modern in some detail as well, but did not speak to their philosophy surrounding the format as a whole. The logic for banning Fury and Up the Beanstalk makes sense. Rakdos Scam is too ubiquitous, and the turn 1 Grief plus Undying effect start is miserable to play against. But Fury is the more commonly played card and has a more warping effect on the meta, effectively plague-winding your opponent and leaving you with a 4/4 double striker on top of it. Without Fury, Scam is less likely to exist, at least to the same degree, and therefore the frequency you get turn 1 Grief scammed will diminish considerably. Up the Beanstalk, on the other hand, is just a broken Magic the Gathering card in any format with lots of artificially reduced mana costs, which is a hallmark of Modern. They particularly noted that many Magic the Gathering players were choosing to use Shardless Agent and Violent Outburst to cascade into beans instead of Crashing Footfalls or Living End, which is indeed an affront to nature. Axing these two cards in Modern makes total sense and should give the format some new life. That said, it would still be nice to hear more about their plan for future Modern BNRs. Will Modern receive the same hands-on treatment that Pioneer seems like it'll now have? It seems unlikely, given that if they did plan to curate Modern as carefully as Pioneer, they would have said so, right? So then what? And I want to be clear that the transparency with regard to future changes in Pioneer is welcome. Bans can be brutal, especially when you don't see them coming. Knowing that Pioneer will be watched more closely and seeing the regular BNR window coming from further off means players are far less likely to be caught off guard. Furthermore, I am positively thrilled that Wizards of the Coast made the risky decision to unban Smuggler's Copter in Pioneer. Cards that were too strong 4 years ago are not necessarily still too strong today. Many cards on the ban list of many formats are beloved by many players, whether it's Splinter Twin in Modern or Smuggler's Copter in Pioneer. Many of these cards don't have a home anywhere in Magic once they get banned, outside of maybe Cube. They're too powerful for the format they're banned in, but not powerful enough for the older formats. So these game pieces that people love to play will get shoved into a trade binder and never touched again. One of my favorite episodes of Shuffle Up and Play is where I got Cedric Phillips and Patrick Sullivan to rebuild classic Splinter Twin and Birthing Pod decks and play them against each other today. I'll link that episode in this video's description. It's honestly one of my favorites and shows that banned cards can still be a lot of fun to play with. And while I am generally in favor of unbans, I do acknowledge that unbanning some of these cards is often a high risk, high reward proposition. If it goes poorly, you get a Golgari Grave Troll situation, which is not a good look for Wizards and generally a bad experience for many Magic the Gathering players. Sometimes a card gets unbanned, and after some initial excitement by the player base, people realize the card just isn't up to snuff anymore. In these instances, the reward for unbanning them turns out to be lower since they don't see much play outside of a few niche homes. The best case scenario is if a card gets unbanned and becomes a good card in the format in some strategies, but doesn't see play everywhere or dominate anything. A great example of this was the unbanning of Stoneforge Mystic in Modern, a fantastic card in the Hammer Time deck, but nowhere near ban-worthy. While it's still early, Smuggler's Copter seems like it could fall into this category. The card is very strong, but so too are a lot of other cards in Pioneer. Smuggler's Copter is colorless, but you can't just jam 4 copies into any aggressive deck and expect to win games. Lots of non-Copter decks can go toe-to-toe with the Looter Scooter. Phoenix has Fiery Impulse to kill it, and Ledger Shredder to block it. Convoke has Gleeful Demolition to blow it up. Azurius Control can sweep it up with Temporary Lockdown, along with the creatures that crew it. Simply put, times have changed since 2019, and Smuggler's Copter currently seems like it is a net positive card to have legal in the format. If that remains true, then unbanning the card is one of the best BNR-related decisions Wizards of the Coast has made in a long, long time. Great! Generally speaking, it is my opinion that banning cards is bad for the game. Ideally, all cards should be legal in whatever formats their sets are legal in. Not only is it simpler that way, but also it's just more fun. Magic cards are designed to be played with. I'm a Magic player. I want to play Magic, and I want to play Magic using Magic cards. I don't like bans. Bans are bad. More importantly, banning a card hurts any player who spent money on that card. As such, banning cards should be a last resort. Unfortunately, given the trend of current card design pushing the power level on new cards to greater and greater attitudes, it seems likely that bans aren't going anywhere anytime soon. As long as we get Furies and expressive iterations and Fable of the Mirror Breakers, we'll also get new bans once, twice, maybe thrice every year. And that sucks, because bans suck, but unpredictable bans suck worse. Given that, the next best thing Wizards of the Coast can do, if they can't stop printing broken cards, is to give us some sense that we know when these bans are coming. Based on these most recent announcements, it seems like that may now be true, at least for Standard and Pioneer. And for that, I commend Magic the Gathering play design. Given these recent announcements, it seems like that may indeed be true, at least for Standard and Pioneer. And for that, I absolutely commend the Magic the Gathering play design team. It feels weird to finally say this after so many years of so many bans, but the future is looking bright, both for future BNR transparency and for the long-term health of Magic the Gathering as a game. But now I want to hear from you. What do you think of these bans, the plan for bans, the transparency around them? Let me know in the comments below. And we talked about a lot of great formats like Pioneer and Modern, and I've got some great episodes of Shuffle Up and Play where we play Pioneer and Modern, and you can check those episodes out in this video's description. And be sure to tune in to my next Whatnot stream this Tuesday, where I will be giving away all 4 of the famous Warhammer Commander precons just to people watching. You just have to hang out with me and maybe you'll walk away with one of these, or a collector booster box, or just use my invite code to get a $15 credit to spend on anything you want on Whatnot, whether it's my stream or someone else's. And thank you, Whatnot, for sponsoring this video.
Ravnica, where ancient guilds rule a city that covers the world. For 10,000 years, their sacred laws protected the peace and cast light in the darkness. But nothing lasts forever, not even the blocks of Ravnica, which have been remastered. Shuffle Up and Play, Ravnica Remastered.